Alrighty. Welcome to the Outfitter Connection podcast, your go-to destination for all things hunting. Today we have a very special guest and a good friend of mine, Mr. Alex Kane. How are you doing today, bud?
I'm doing good, Austin. Thanks for having me on. Excited to
Ab-
just a little bit of chit chat back and forth.
Yeah, a little hangout session today. If you don't mind, go ahead and tell listeners kind of who you are, what you're about, what you like to do. Kind of dive into a little bit of that.
Okay, well, as you stated, my name's Alex, and I grew up here just outside of Huntington, West Virginia. Kind of a smaller town in comparison, but grew up out the outdoors. Started out with squirrel hunting, really took into deer hunting, and my now wife Morgan and I really just started getting into a little bit of guided hunting, getting deeper into whitetails. We've just kind of been trying to touch base with anything we can get out there and chase and pursue. We're just always looking for the next adventure. Our roots are in whitetail, but we really we like the change of scenery, the different pace, learn something new. Background, work history. I'm a registered nurse locally. I do critical care. I've been doing it for about 6 years, and I got a very flexible schedule. I work 36 hours a week, so I can work like a 6 on, 8 off schedule. So that gives me a lot of time for hunting, planning trips, anything with my free time. So that's kind of a little the backstory with me.
Yeah, and for the listeners out there, behind you is kind of like a 3-piece, beautiful whitetail mount that you have. Those are some dandies, man. They are some good-looking whitetail.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate in the areas that I hunt, and I've been managed to kind of take care of the top tier of the area. So this one right here, that's about a 130-inch 8-point roundabout, and the one on the far right, that one's about 149-inch mainframe 12 with 2 kickers, so he's a 14. Just absurd mass on him. He's got 6.5-inch bases on that left side, and then the buck in the center there, that's Morgan's first buck. We killed that on her grandpa's farm. All 3 of us were out hunting, and she was the only one that got a deer that morning, so that was just really special for us. So her deer got to hang out with the big boys up there. So
Absolutely.
but
How important is that to you to have your spouse also get into the hunting world? And how important is that to like kind of share that passion together?
So it makes everything so much more special when you get to do it together. But just to word out to the listeners, if you can get your spouse into it, you're going to get to do so much more. I mean, your opportunities are just through the roof versus trying to explain out this vacation to go do a hunt, or I'm going to take this much time to go chase deer. I mean, it was like 2 years ago, we went to Africa and did our first safari over there and just had an amazing time. And she kind of got hooked on it. And now it's kind of turned into not so much what hunt I can book for myself, but what can 2 people do reasonably. So it takes a lot of planning. So far, we've done the safari like I spoke of, and we did an alligator hunt together, and then just our deers. And it's so much better to enjoy it with a spouse. I mean, everybody likes to go out with their buddies, but getting your wife involved is just a really cool thing. I mean, the people that know about it, they get it, but it just makes the overall experience so much better.
Absolutely. And I notice you've got like a pretty good sized collection of sheds down there in your little bucket. You do a lot of shed hunting up there as well?
Oh yeah, that's kind of turned into our winter, springtime hobby. We like to just get out there, enjoy the little bit of sunshine we get for that January to March period. It seems like we have a lot of good luck with this basket. So all of our big ones around the edges are more respectable antlers, and it's filled with just little dinks down in the center. But that's a lot of work between me and my wife. We average 5 miles per antler, so you can kind of take a guess as to how absurd it is on how much time and distance it takes for us to cover all that. But
Yeah.
we've managed to find almost all those either at one of our local hunting spots here in West Virginia or on my personal farm in Ohio. So it's kind of cool that we got the back history with all those. We're not just bouncing fields and all kinds of areas and finding sheds of deer that aren't really known to us. They're not as sentimental. That's the word I'm looking for.
Right. Now, shed hunting for people that want to do it but haven't done it yet or haven't thought about really doing it, it's a heck of a way to get in shape. You're covering some
Yes.
ground, and especially out there where you're at, because it's not flat farm fields. It's uphill, downhill, uphill, downhill.
Uphill, downhill. There's some, you got a little bit of fields, but not as much as you want. But it's it's very enlightening for the young hunter just to go out and look for these, because you kind of, you find sheds, that's where the deer are. So you kind of back it up a little bit and you figure out, hey, I'm finding antlers in this particular thicket, or you're finding them near this food source. I mean, all this stuff kind of ties together into hunting success. But back for a new person getting out there and doing it and getting in shape, yes, it's a really good time, and you get really tuned in to finding them. It's the most difficult shed antler to find is your first. After that, it starts getting a little bit easier every time.
It's if I could put it into terms with anything like that I've done, it's kind of like morel mushroom hunting.
Yeah.
Your first one, it seems like you're never going to find it. When you finally do find it and you start looking around and you're like, oh, okay, that's where they're starting to pop up. You look around and that's where you start seeing a bunch of them. And it shed hunting's pretty similar on that front.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that you wouldn't take into account with shed hunting is weather conditions. That makes or breaks it for me some days when I go out looking for them. And I don't have much experience with morels because they're not really locally to me. I mean, you can travel 30 miles one way or another, but they're not very prominent right here. But sunny days, everybody wants to go out and hike on a sunny day, but that is the worst day to look for deer antlers. I mean, it's
Really?
just absurd difference. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you feel is the difference maker there between like a sunny day and a cloudy overcast day?
So with a sunny day, if you're in the timber like I am most of the time, if you're in fields, you can get away with it a little bit. But in this timber around here with these leaves and just branches and everything, your leaves when you dry out, they just kind of fold up and they take up a lot of volume. They just stack on top of each other. So if you got an antler laying in leaves, I mean, you pretty well got to walk up on it unless it's some 60, 70-inch shed antler that you can spot the tines a while away. But I mean, that's not the case. I'm a 50-inch antler is a big deal around here for me. So if you're looking for little, 100-inch 8-point sides or a 50 to 80-inch total buck, I mean, it's absurd to try to find something like that sticking up through the leaves. But you got an overcast day after some rain and those leaves absorb the moisture and they kind of flatten out. The forest floor gets a little bit darker just from absorbing all that moisture. Those shed antlers just lighten up because the bone absorbs it and they glisten and everything else is darker. So it's just much easier to spot them.
Huh, that's pretty neat. That's a good piece of advice for somebody that's looking to shed hunt.
Mm-hmm.
What's one of your favorite hunting memories, either with Morgan, with your family, yourself, whichever way? Like, what is your, like, when you think back to all your hunting trips and everything you've done, what is like your one memory that stands out the best?
For my wife and I, it was a very important moment to be with her when she got her zebra when we went on that safari. This has been a dream animal of hers since she was a little girl, just watching the hunting show with her dad. I mean, just watching all the safaris. That was her one animal. It's before going doing anything else, not an elk, not a moose or a goat or anything like that. She just wanted a zebra. So when we went out there and went on that safari, and there was this zebra just standing up on this dam and the sun was shining through its mane, and it was just had this little glow all around the outline of it. And there was some giraffes in the background. I mean, it was just full Lion King feeling of just, then she made a great shot on it. I mean, it was just like picture perfect kind of movie scene situation. And just, that was a cool moment. For my personal hunting journey, I gotta say, back when I was in middle school, hunting with my dad for deer out of a double man stand on the edge of a field, and no rhyme or reason for this deer to come out. I mean, I was young. I was hunting with a youth bow. It was first time bow hunting. I had an 8 point little basket rack, 100-inch deer. I mean, it was really good deer for the area and for especially for like an 11, 12-year-old kid. I had that thing at 15 yards and I missed it. No limbs, nothing, just open field. And if it wasn't for that situation of me just missing that deer, I might have not gotten the bug. I mean, everybody remembers the one thing that like kicks them in the overdrive when it is being an outdoorsman. And that was it for me. I mean, once I missed and I got humbled like that on that situation, it really just put me down the rabbit hole with it. I mean, I was ate up with it. I was like, I can't have this happen. I mean, if I would have got that buck, I mean, I probably wouldn't have been, I would have thought it was easy, no big deal. You just sit there, go get one. But then I went down the rabbit hole of chasing bigger deer, and learning more about it. And if looking back, if I didn't have that experience, I might have not been where I am now.
Yeah. And that's when you and I hunted together on your Aoudad trip. That was something that you had kind of touched on, is like you want that older, mature Aoudad. Do you hunt
Yeah.
your whitetail the same way? Do you just go after,
Oh,
the horn size or antler size comes second to age and maturity?
oh yes, yes. So, I mean, I've had my share of deer, and I've gotten to the point that I'd rather let the little ones go because shooting a 3-year-old to me, I mean, it's all fun, but you just kind of advance as a hunter. You kind of want to look for the next step. And now that I got a very good piece of property secured and I can really help manage the age structure, and I have good neighbors that I work with, that we're all in agreement on what our game plan is. For me to settle and not let these deer get older is just kind of it's selfish in a way. I mean, I want the deer to get to their peak, that I'm taking them right before they got to start worrying really hard about the winters getting to them, or statistically they get so old something's going to happen to them. So I really take pride in pursuing 6-year-old deer and older. But if I got a 5-year-old that's kind of been a nomad, I might get 1 or 2 pictures of him a year. He's not on my property normally. I wouldn't put that away, but I typically just turn away 3 and 4-year-olds just to let them get a little bit bigger, because part of me just doesn't want to break away from that age structure, because I know they'll be in there next year. I don't want to settle and just regress. I like to just keep to my goals, and I don't want to say standards like I got to kill a big buck, but it's just, if I'm going to use my buck tag and take one of these animals off of my properties, I like to let them have every advantage they can get to get older, get smarter, and that kind of deal.
I got you. And it is kind of fun to watch your deer go from that 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, and then you start really seeing them blow up in that 5.5, 6.5 age range. And then
Yeah.
it's like, all right, if I can let him go, if I can let that 5.5-year-old go one more year, he's
Hmm.
gonna be an excellent deer for whether you shoot him, your neighbors shoot him, whoever. But
Yeah.
you're prolonging that good genetic for another season.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a bit of that too. Sometimes I get lucky and there's some real big just antler blow up those later years, but I tend to see minute changes. Like I got one buck I'm pursuing right now, and I've had 5 years of history off him, but 4 years of antlers now. I just recently found one of it. I think it was his right side that I found, and for 4 years of following this deer, he's put on maybe 20 extra inches. He went from a 100-inch 8 point to maybe a little mid 130s. He's probably 100, 110 when I first started picking him up on camera and finding the sheds. But I mean, he's going on 6 years old now, and they just don't break out of that 130 mark very often. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things you just kind of, what's in your area. Sometimes you get big 3 or 4-year-olds or a 5-year-old, but really breaking out that 130, 140 bracket, I mean, you're really getting some age or just really good genetics.
Yeah. What does hunting mean to you personally? Is it more of like going out and it's a satisfaction thing, or is it like I went out and accomplished what I set out to do on these hunts, or is there a different aspect to it?
Um, well, I'm going to speak about this one and just my personal whitetail ventures. It is mental toughness because it's such a long game. You don't just get out there first sit. I mean, I typically put in 150 hours, maybe plus a year sitting and stand, mornings, afternoons, evenings. It varies, but just to get out there and gruel out that time because it's a lot of it's luck, a lot of it's right place, right time, right property. But I mean, just to get out there and hit these goals of age structure, what you're wanting. I mean, that's just such a enlightening thing, and it's rewarding. But
It's
just
everybody's got like that different thing that hunting does for them. It's whenever I go out and go into the mountains here in West Texas, I just want to grind it out and see them do something they've never done before. Whether there's a harvest at the end of it or not, it's like I just want to see those animals where they're most comfortable, where it's second nature to them to be there, because the Aoudad are not, you know, they're not originally from here; they're imported in.
yeah,
But it's always neat just to see like what changes those animals' pattern, whether it's
yeah,
human interference, whether it's a coyote walkthrough or whatever. And the more I'm in the field, the more I learn, and the more I learn, the more it's like, okay, I want to go back and do it again. I want to go back and do it again, and just keep kind of rolling into it.
yeah. And your situation is so cool because you cover so much more ground. You really get to see how they work the environment, how just they can move to a different vegetation in a different area. And I mean, just trying to relocate them in that just vastness that you cover it. That would be really cool just to spend the time like you do out there and seeing how the herd moves through and how they can just adapt to different stuff. Say the cactus numbers weren't what they supposed to, whatever inclement weather can happen, and then all of a sudden your hot spot's just dead because you can hunt those year round. So just the way that they hunted last year doesn't mean that you got that vegetation or something in the future. You got to move around. And it's more than just like the 200 acres I'm covering. You're covering thousands of acres, seeing how they move, and it's cool.
One of the key things that I found this year was the spring in between that big valley. It had completely dried up this year. Last year it was full of water. The year before it was full of water. This year it was just bone dry. And I used to go through that spring and like looking all over for tracks, for sign, for okay, did they move through here last night? Because if I can find if they've moved it in an area that night or that morning, I can usually get somebody on those sheep that day. But with that spring being gone, it's like, oh, well, we're going to be covering some miles today.
Yeah. And it's not for the weak. That is tough covering those miles up there. It is steep, it is rocky, it's unforgiving.
Yeah. I mean, we made the move on that first group of sheep that you saw. We were over on one mesa and dropped down and all the way back up over the top and to them. And it took us 45 minutes, where it's taken me with clients a couple hours to make that trek.
Yeah. You definitely got to be ready for that. There is no skimping out on the exercising, prepping for that, hitting the Stairmaster, doing the weighted packs. I mean, you really got to be able to move, because when them sheep are 1,000 yards away, they're not waiting around knowing you're coming. You got to be able to move and get on them quicker than they can move out of the area.
Yeah. When you were on that hunt with me, have you ever seen anything like that, where we went down, came up, we glassed those sheep up and we knew there was a bunch, but once we crested that top and got set up and we're watching them, have you ever seen anything like that in your life, where there's like 200 sheep, there's no shortage of a shooter in there?
No, I mean, that was so surreal to look on that many animals at that distance. I mean, you can really see out there. I mean, couldn't believe that we're looking across a canyon and it's 600 to 1,000 yards away, and how many were there. I mean, we were having a hard time just communicating on which ram we were looking at, because when you say, yeah, the dark ram by the cactus, it's hard to navigate through it. I mean, it was just absurd. I mean, you're picturing that and you're like, this ain't real to see this many sheep at once and try to work through them all and decide what's best and come up with a plan. And even coming up the plan was so difficult, because I mean, how do you get around 200 sets of eyes and getting that right distance when
Yeah.
they can see so far, and we can hear them 600 yards away just moving rocks around as they walk, let alone us trying to sneak up in the preferred shooting range.
Yeah. What was there anything that you were able to overlay from your deer hunting experience to that sheep hunt? Any tactics or anything like that?
I felt like having a good knowledge of thermals really kind of was helpful with that situation, just with knowing how we need to press our time. I mean, when we were on those 200 sheep, we were there midday and all our thermals were rising. I mean, it was like 20, 30 degrees when we started our morning, and it got up to 60, 70. So we're sitting on the edge of this mesa over a huge canyon there. And I wasn't too worried about them winding us. We had the wind in our face and our thermals were rising at that point. So, good attention to the thermals in my area is really big. And coming out there in that vastness, I knew that, we had some time. They weren't going to booger out from our scent unless our wind switches. And even though they're so low below us, they weren't going to get our thermals as everything was heating up like that. So we had time to really put a good game plan together. I mean, if it was getting towards dark and I knew our scent was going to be dropping as those thermals are going down, as everything's cooling off, I would have known, hey, we got to rush. And if you say it's time to take your shot, kind of knew what was going to happen. It was either they were going to booger out of there or we were going to take a shot. So that was kind of the biggest thing I was able to bring into it, was just a little bit better knowledge of timing stuff by the time of the day.
Yeah. What kind of rolling out of that sheep hunting into your regular routine of hunting, what piece of gear is like that one piece of gear that you always grab? Like, it doesn't matter what you're hunting, where you're going, you just got this one solid piece of gear that it's like, I cannot leave home without this.
I got to go with my bino harness. Like, I got a couple side pockets on that for rangefinder, phone case, miscellaneous, and that thing keeps me in check. I mean, if it was up to me keeping stuff in my pocket and not forgetting to laying it on the ground and walking off with it, because I'm notorious for forgetting stuff and laying it down. So just the fact that having this big chest system and I can feel the weight difference on it keeps me in check from forgetting my stuff, because I know it's going to happen. So that's probably my favorite piece of gear that I take everywhere and always have on me. And it's just so universal. I can extra shells, the rangefinder, the phone, granola bar, it's like the Swiss Army knife for just carry all.
Yeah. And that's what I kind of like about mine too, is because it's got the molly straps, it's got the pockets, it's got the pistol holster in the back, the big pocket for the binos, and then the rangefinder pocket, spots to clip and unclip stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It can be, that bino harness can be overbearing, but once you learn, like, okay, I've got this and this in my left pocket, I've got this and this in my right pocket, I've got my gloves and my inReach clipped on my right side, I've got my wallet tucked in the back, extra rangefinder batteries under the bottom. Once you figure out like how that one piece of gear fits into your whole program, it makes life just that much easier to have.
Oh,
because instead of having to like take your backpack and get an extra battery out or to get your extra blades for your knife, it's like, oh yeah, it's right here. Here you go.
And it keeps it simple too, because I mean, if you got to drop and move on an animal, if you really can't have it in a chest system for your bino harness and all that, you probably don't need it just for a quick move.
Right.
I mean, that way you're not just trying to bring extra stuff you don't need. Because I'm not talking like a couple hour stalk. I mean, you got to drop and move like your shots in the next 20 minutes. You don't need all that junk in your backpack. You need just simplicity right here. I mean, even just having a knife in it might be a little too much because you're going to go back and get your pack if you get something. So just the bare necessities you need to make a shot, you're organizing in there with maybe a few little extras, but I think it's just an ideal piece of gear for anybody that's going out.
And those bino harnesses, once you find the one that works best for you, it's great because I'll take mine from the mountains and I'll go guide, axis or scimitar or fallow, and I don't have to change anything. It's all, I know where everything's
Yeah.
at. It's all right there. It's universal for every hunting scenario that I find myself in, and that's what I love about mine. And you feel the same way about yours. You can take it,
Oh yeah.
go scout, or you can go take it to go look for turkeys or go deer hunt.
Yeah. And one thing for the listeners is there's no perfect one. You're looking for what you can give the least amount with.
Yep.
It doesn't matter the one you have, there's going to be at least one or two problems with it.
Yep. And that's a lot of people get hung up on the gear, especially with so many premium brands being a thing now. You got diehard Sitka guys, you got diehard Kuiu guys, diehard Badlands, name your brand, whatever, name your choice of brand. But what I found is there's not one specific brand that has everything I need. So I kind of mix and match based on like what I think we're going to end up in that day.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really realistic because it's personal preference.
For
And
sure.
I mean, it could even just get down to if you're a Sitka guy and you might just not like how their one shirt texture is. I mean, it could just, you got to be versatile with the stuff. Take what works. Don't be the brand guy because brands don't kill animals. What works for you does.
Yep. And the sad thing is too is most of these brands really don't care about on the consumer end. They're, as long as you're buying their product, that's the end of the transaction. They're happy. They got their sale off of you that day, and that's all that counts. It's hard to find brands that really have that like customer care. You get more of it in the premium brands than you do, like you're not going to call Mossy Oak and call them and ask them for a warranty on a pair of pants that you bought at Walmart. It's not going to happen. They're going to say, you spent $14 on that. Go spend $14 again. At least with these premium brands, you can call them with warranty issues. You pop a zipper, pop a stitch or whatever, and they'll be like, yeah, no problem. Send it back in. We'll send you a new one. And that's where the value is definitely there for the premium brands, but it's a big chunk to chew off for a lot of people.
Yeah. But I mean, I think of it, a lot of it's too, is you got to buy what's really for what you're doing. I mean, if you come over here and you're hunting a tree stand with me, which I don't really use ladder stands, I carry stands on my back everywhere I go. But if you're going to climb up in a ladder stand and you're going to sit there all day, you don't need Kuiu or Sitka. You just need something warm. It doesn't even have to be camo. I truly believe camo is just, it's nice, but it's not needed. You can wear just dark collars and be all right. But if you're going to go do an Alaskan sheep hunt, yeah, I'm probably going to want something higher end that's moisture wicking and wind tolerant and something lightweight that you need to get in those premium brands. But you buy for what you really think is most versatile for you. I mean, if I could have the perfect hunting clothes for my local whitetail hunting, I get rid of all my Kuiu stuff. If I could find just a solid pair of heavy wool bibs and a wool jacket, just something heavy that's tolerant to wind. It seems like heavier the clothes, the better it is for just sitting for long periods of time in the wind and the cold.
Yeah, because you're losing a lot of heat with some of these thinner layers. And on my side of it, it's more, I wear a lot of thinner clothes just because of the heat here, but it's almost the exact opposite during your hunting season in West Virginia, where like you want those heavy base layers, you want those medium base layers, a heavy mid layer, and then a good solid outer layer.
Yeah. My area, sweat's the enemy. That's the big thing.
Oh yeah, being wet and cold is awful.
Yeah. I mean, if you sweat, I mean, you're done. So staying dry, getting in, and then having heavy layers for when you get there and get settled. Put them on. As soon as you're good and simmered down, you're not sweaty, even let stuff dry on you, or preferably don't sweat at all if you can help it before you put on your layers. But out there with you, you really need moisture wicking. Get that sweat off you, try to keep you cool. Because I've been through that. When you start getting dehydrated, that's a slippery slope. I mean, you're going to be in trouble quick.
Yeah, the dehydration out there happens fast. You're not going to feel it, and then all of a sudden you're going to hit a brick wall, and you're unfortunately most of the time that's the end of the day, because you don't have any more gas to go another 200 or 300 yards, let alone another 4 or 5 miles.
Yeah, and it turns into that quick.
Yeah. What's one of your tips for beginners that are looking, maybe there's a client or somebody listening to this episode that they haven't broken into the hunting world, right? And let's change it up to big game, because you and I both enjoy big game hunting a lot. They may have done some bird hunting or some small game, but they
Okay.
want to break into that big game hunting world. What's like the best piece of advice that you can give somebody for that?
Breaking into it in term of taking the step to plan out a trip yourself,
Yep.
or going to break into getting a guide to help give you direction. Which route would you prefer me to take with that? Because there's two different ones, two different
Well,
ways to go about
let's go the guide route. What's the best
it.
way
Okay.
for somebody that's looking to book a trip out of their normal area that they would hunt, and they plan on traveling somewhere for a specific hunt? What advice would you give for finding an outfitter that suits your needs?
So that's a very good one. So I started into this with no knowledge of hunting anything but whitetail. So when you're getting into it and you say, I want to go this route, I want to take the step, one, you need to realize that you don't just plan this on just a whim. For the most part, I mean, you say, I'm going to do this in 2, 3 years, or I want to do it next year. You be realistic as to your timeline. And then next step is realizing, yes, you're going to hunt an animal, but as much as you're hunting an animal, you're hunting a guide that you want to spend your time with. So you need to really search around and talk to different people, see who you connect with, and who you think you can stand to spend this time with, and who you think's going to take you in a positive route to help pursue your animal. And then, I mean, to not have a good experience on a guided hunt is, I hate to say it's your fault, but with all the research you can do on the internet, the simplicity of picking up a phone, calling a reference, asking them how they found out about this guide, and just doing just simple research. I mean, there's not many reasons that you shouldn't be able to tune into somebody that you can get along with, or know that you're going to have a positive experience with. And I'd really recommend that, because when you're, pinched for time, and you don't know if you're going to be able to make multiple of these trips to try to learn an area and do a DIY. I mean, it's very important to pick your guide, know what you want to go after, and research who you're going to hunt with as much as you're researching the animal in themselves, because it makes an experience so much better having a good guide and having a positive experience. Because you can even talk to some people that didn't have a good guide, got an animal, and it wasn't as good for them. They didn't enjoy everything. But
And it is very important for the listeners that haven't done a guided trip. And like you said, you should spend as much time researching your guide as you do the animal you're going to chase,
yeah,
because it's the world of the internet. You can tell people that, oh, we kill 100 sheep a year and they're all 35 inches or better. Well,
yeah.
ask that guide, or pick whatever animal. I use sheep because that's my
Hmm.
forte. But ask that guide for 10 references or 5 references. Call those references, and like you were saying, and ask them, how was your experience? How was your trip? Did you have fun? What was his or her personality like? Um, what was your success? Did you have any success? Were you seeing plenty of animals to chase, or was it just kind of like throwing it into the wind and seeing what stuck?
I'll tell you another thing with, I never thought it was feasible planning the guided hunts that I've done and everything. But I mean, when you break it down and you look at doing your first DIY trip yourself and all just the little things that add up, you think you're really coming out ahead, unless you're just that diehard guy that's you need to get out there and, you know, gut it out yourself just to have any kind of thrill with the situation. And I get that, but if you're really wanting to dip your feet into these new animals or this Western style of hunting or just anything different, I mean, yes, it's more expensive for a guide, but you're also gaining knowledge. Just because you did one guide, it doesn't mean that you didn't get your feet in the door to know what you're going to do to plan your future trips. It's just kind of helping speed up the learning curve that you might pick up stuff from this hunt. So
Right.
neither
And
way is wrong.
that's one of like my biggest tips that I preach a lot about is like, don't guide your guide. You wouldn't,
Mhm.
God forbid a house catches on fire, fire department shows up. You wouldn't sit there and tell the fire department how to put your house out.
Yeah,
They,
be
they've,
hoping they're
they've,
battered.
yeah, they're, they put out so many fires that it's second nature to them. It's second nature to, unless one of these guys, unless you book a hunt with a guide that it's his first year or second year, whatever guiding. But most of your guides have been doing this long enough that they know those animals and what those animals are going to do before the animals even think that they're going to do what the guide
Mhm.
says they're going to do. You know, with your sheep hunt, we had kind of talked about like what the game plan was to get to close in 1,000 yards. We could go down in the bottom, which they don't really like, or we could cut straight across the bottom and go straight up the next mesa. And they're going to hang out there because we both kind of picked up on the fact that they're just kind of migrating through and feeding. They're not in a hurry. They're not
Yeah.
they're not super focused on everything going on around like they had just been spooked out of a hole they were in. They were just kind of lazily coming across that hill, and that's what allowed us to be able to close that much distance and get right on top of them. So with that being said, like your guide most of the time, and I can't speak for all guides because there are some dirt bags. There's quite a few dirt bags, unfortunately. But a majority of the time, your guide knows the animal that you're chasing far better than a YouTube star that you watched on your computer the day before you
Mhm.
got going on the hunt. And it's a hard thing to grasp because I am a younger guy and I do take some older clients out, and I do seem to butt heads more with the that 40 to 50 age range more
Mhm.
than I do, you know, guys like yours and I's age or younger, where
Yeah.
it's like, you know, they may have 50 years of hunting or 40 years of hunting or 30 years of hunting, where you and I only may have 20 years of hunting. But I
Mhm.
spend 100+ days out a year in the field.
Yeah.
You're coming, not necessarily you, but you know, some of these clients are coming out for their first time ever to that area or seeing their first time ever seeing a sheep, and
Mhm.
somehow they've got it in their mind that they know more about the sheep than I do. And
Yeah.
it's not saying that I know everything about the sheep, but I spend a lot of time with them. I know I can look at a sheep and just based on what the Century U's doing, where that herd's going to go, if it's even worth chasing or not.
Mhm. Yeah, age discrepancy uh, is a big thing, and it spans so many different topics, and it's so hard to get that across to people that you spend this much time, or you've been doing it this many years, and might be a younger guy, but it's hard to deal with the older clientele. I mean, I have that in my own workplace. I've been in critical care now 6 years, and I can be training somebody that's a new grad in their 40s, and I can have patients that'll question me when I'm teaching the older person how to do it.
Right.
So I know exactly what you mean with just it can get frustrating with stuff like that. It's like, sit down, shut up. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. That's the reason you contacted me and paid me to go do this.
Hmm.
If and this is I don't know. I might end up cutting this part out because this is going to come across real arrogant. But you paid me for my expertise. Let me do my job.
Yeah. You're not there to think. You're there to gut it out and be guided. That's the part of having a guide.
Right.
Otherwise, I mean, it's simple. I don't know why people want to overcomplicate that. I mean, you can compare and contrast ideas and be like, "Hey, man, that rock looks kind of steep. I don't know if I can climb it. Can we go around this way? That's reasonable, but don't argue the other stuff." You know what I mean?
Yeah. How do you incorporate future conservation efforts into your hunting?
So right now, I'm really big in the property management. So I'm answering this as, and I'm just wanting to create better habitat. Is that sufficient, or you want me to go a different route with that, or can I go off of
No,
this
that
one?
no, that's actually pretty good because habitat management plays a much larger role, in my opinion, than age management or class management of your herd.
Okay. So right now, my property I'm dealing with was a recent select cut before we got. So it's probably about 7, 8 years now of a fresher cut. So I'm dealing with a lot of just crap tree growth, autumn olive, just nasty brush, and it's closing off acres. And I mean, like, there's one patch that the deer aren't even using. I mean, I know it sounds absurd to say a deer will not use it, but it is so stupid thick and no way to get through it. I just have trails going around and around it. They might get 5, 10 feet into it, and it's just getting to be stagnant acreage now. So I'm trying to go through and open stuff in, let new vegetation grow. I'm kind of leaning towards learning how to do controlled burns.
Mhm.
In our local state, there is some learning curve to it. You got to do some classes, but I'm really taking interest in maybe pursuing that. That way I can start to burn some areas and create new vegetation and kind of get rid of that stagnant uh, older timber areas that don't get any new growth because they have such shade from the limb cover. Opening more areas to get accessible, just planting food plots, just overall property improvement is kind of what I'm going for right now, on top of working the age structure better. So just wanting to make the deer want to be there. And honestly, this has been more fun than hunting to me.
Yeah,
It's just kind of tinkering.
yeah. It's for lack of better terms, it's like you're taking a baby and nurturing it, right? You take a piece of
Mhm.
property and treat it like a baby, and you nurture it and watch it grow. Um, are you leaning more? Are you doing supplemental food plots, or are you leaning on the natural forage, the natural grazing areas, and things like that for your deer?
So right now, I've been playing a lot with food plots. I've been messing with corn and some brassicas, and I've been trying some ryegrass too, but it's hit or miss on some of this stuff taking off because of planting seasons. I'm notorious for always having a drought after I plant, or I'll plant in a rain and then I won't get anything but 100-degree temperatures for the next month. I mean,
Right.
it's really finicky with our planting season, in my opinion, or maybe I just suck at it because I'm starting into it. But from where my property was select cut, I lost all my mature oak trees.
Oh no.
So I have young oak stands. So from October into early November, I don't have any of that food sources that these deer are wanting to move toward, these oaks and miscellaneous. I have the cover, so come November, the deer will come back to me because the does want to get in these thick areas. But then come December, they're moving off again. So I'm starting to get all this food plot stuff going. That way I can keep them in the area. It's
No.
I haven't tuned it in enough to beat a white oak yet, and I doubt I will, but late season's starting to be really good for me with many deer moving in. And I mean, it's just like my shed antlers. It used to be, if we found 5 to 10 on our 200 acres, that was a big deal. I mean, they
Right.
just didn't winter on us. They'd go somewhere else. And I mean, this year we found 15 plus already and really hadn't been hitting it hard. I mean,
Good.
just the deer are on us more.
Yeah.
We've got the cover. We're starting to get some food. I have enough south facing slopes that they're tending to bed on us when it's even colder out.
Mhm.
So they can just hit those warm slopes and then dump into the food right at dark. So it's been working. It's a fine tuning process, but it's coming together better and better each year.
Yeah. What what percentage would you say cover versus food, and how big of a difference does that make? Because you drive across, I haven't been out to your neck of the woods, but in the Midwest, you drive through and you see a lot of cornfields or a lot of grain fields, and in the evenings there'll be hundreds of deer out there,
Hmm.
and then you oftentimes wonder, like, well, where the heck are these things going during the day? So how important is having that good balance between cover and food on your property?
Um, it, that's a hard one to answer. I would much rather have the premium cover than I would the premium food because at least in our area, you kind of run into a situation you can't hardly have enough acreage to have both.
Okay.
I mean, so I'd say it's 50-50. I mean, with cover to food, because I mean, everybody wants their kitchen and bedroom in the same house, you know, don't
Right.
have to go too far for it, but um, you can have the best food plots, you can have the best protein, the best mineral sites, you can have the golden corral of food plots. But if you don't have the cover they're looking for to feel secure, that don't mean nothing. You're just going to get nighttime pictures.
Mhm.
But then if you got the cover, then you're trying to get them to come out of that cover. It can be hard too. So more than likely, you'll get more deer just having cover than you will food. But then rather than having a nice food plot they come into every evening, you're trying to hunt them in their bedding area, and you might only get a couple hunts out of it before they wise up and stay out of there.
Right.
So success
How?
wise, I'd rather have cover, I think.
Oh yeah, I got you. How important is having trail cameras out? Like, do you run a wide array, or do you have, maybe five or six or something like that on your property? And how important is that for collecting data of, like, knowing, okay, this deer is killable or this buck is not?
I'd say it's really important if you want to pattern one buck. Some of these guys are fanatics and they want to run 20 cell phone cameras on one deer. And I'm just kind of getting to the point that we're we have too much technology and it's taking the fun out of it. I'm obsessing over it too much. And I think I'm getting away from my hunting roots. So I to be successful, multiple cameras make a big difference, routinely checking them and hunting the prime times. I mean, these guys that can say a deer daylighted 3 days in a row and they're going out on the fourth with the same weather conditions. I mean, that's getting people big deer. But to me, I'm kind of it's losing its luster just focusing on cameras every day. I'm just
Yeah. I mean, our dads and grandpas, they did it without cameras and they were moderately
yeah.
successful. Obviously that was 20, 30 years ago,
Mhm.
but I feel while there are more big deer getting killed now, the stories of back then of somebody shooting, 180 class deer really kind of made the headlines, just
Yeah.
because they may have seen that deer out in the field while they were tilling the ground or while they were working the land or whatever, but
Hmm.
they didn't have, like, oh, I've had this deer on camera every 4 days for the last 3 years, and he showed up one day. And they don't have that history that, we may have with whitetail. But
Hmm.
whenever they shot that deer, it definitely made more of an impact, in my opinion, than these guys that
Yeah.
are out. Not saying that there's anything wrong with killing like a 200-inch free range whitetail, right? But it seems like those guys, it brought so much more excitement and enjoyment, because
Yeah.
it didn't feel like it was work. They were just out hunting to hunt, and that big buck happened to show up.
Yeah. And I don't know. That's just kind of what I'm leaning towards doing in the future. Just get away from the cameras and just seeing what happens.
Yeah, bringing old school back.
Uh, yeah, I used to run like 20 regular cameras. Like I love those Walmart Tascos. They were my favorite
Hmm.
camera. Like they were like $30. They took great photos and videos. And I had them on every corner, just moving around, trying to learn how the deer were using the areas. And I just love checking the cameras. And it still felt like I was like trying to learn to hunt by doing that because I didn't have them right to my phone. I had to check the cards and go in and look at the sign and whatnot. And then I dropped down to 5 cell phone cameras, and I've been running those in kind of like my rut areas. I usually just put them in rut funnels, and then I just wait for things to heat up and get them moving through those areas. And then that's when I start hunting heavily. But now I'm using them and I'm just obsessing over them too much, and it's taken away. I'm like, well, a deer that would have made me happy a couple years ago, I now know about this new one. Now I'm like, and you're back and forth, and I'm just getting too obsessive with it. And I think this year I might just do no cameras. I'm really leaning towards it because I can kind of field judge one now. I've been doing it long enough to say, all right, this has got the body characteristics of what I'm after. And then just not worrying about what else is there, just going out, looking for something of that age class and calling it a day and not getting caught up with the 150 I might have got one picture of an entire year and be more content with the 135-inch 6-year old.
Right. Yeah, and
That
it's
versus
no, go ahead.
you window shop too much when you get trail cameras and you get fixated on it and just kind of ruining it for me.
Yeah, and like you said, it you do lean on them, not just you, but other people. They lean on them really, really hard, where it's like it almost takes it damn near takes the fun out of it, unfortunately.
Mhm.
It, and don't get me wrong, it's cool to see those bucks in the summer when they're in velvet and you're like, oh man, I wonder what he's going to look like in another 2 or 3 months. But yeah, I think, and it's funny because if you and I feel that way about trail cameras for deer hunting, we're not the only ones. There's probably
Yeah.
hundreds of people out there listening, or
Mhm.
hopefully they're listening to this, and they're like, I have been obsessing over my trail cameras. Let's just turn them off for a year. Let's just go.
Yeah.
Let's make the hunting world fun again, where it's like, hey, as long as he's big and mature, big bodied, mature deer, it's good enough for me.
Yeah. I'll tell you one thing that's really been kind of getting my attention more and more because you can know what a rub is, you can know scrapes, you can run cameras and pattern a deer, but that's not true woodsmanship. I mean, I still can't really look at a buck track and tell you whether it's, a 2, 3, 4 year old deer or if I'm at like the 7-year old range, just an absurd deer track. Like I'm starting to get better at it and kind of being able to judge them, be like, oh, this is a good deer. Yeah, this makes sense. This is the solo trail into the worst kind of bedding area, isolated, far away from does, just all your standard stuff that comes with buck bedding. But I really don't have that good of woodsmanship yet to look at a terrain feature and be like, all right, they're crossing through here. I'm good, and I've been lucky on my property. I've hunted for 10 years, 15 years, but I don't know, just the more you hunt one area and you get stagnant with it, and what's the word I'm looking for? Um, golly, I'm complacent. I get very complacent with my place. Just the thrill of just the thoughts of going somewhere new and just tracking a track back and looking at terrain and just being able to just pick that stuff out just sounds so much better and to find success in a 4-year old in my area versus being complacent and wanting this 6-year old. I don't know. You go through different phases as a hunter as to what you want to do.
Yeah, and there's some people that are perfectly content with only filling doe tags.
Hmm.
I don't have a problem with somebody that wants to fill doe tags. There's this another weird conception that once a spike, always a spike, and there's been numerous of studies that show that that's not the case always. Um,
Hmm.
does it happen occasionally? I'm sure, just because bad genetics or whatever the case may be. But I'm also one of those, like, as long as it's done ethically, and ethics change from person to person, right? Some people won't.
Yeah.
Some people believe something that's unethical is shooting an animal at 600 or 700 yards. As long as it's not illegal, an illegal means of take, and it makes that hunter happy, I'm happy for them. And it doesn't matter where my opinion stands on, like, oh, I wouldn't have shot that deer, or like, it was a little too young. If it gets people out there and buying hunting licenses, I support it. And
Yeah.
it's tough because I'm management minded, and I realize that, a good vast majority of hunters anymore are not management minded, but this industry, we're collapsing in on itself.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
the antis, I was just talking to my buddy Kyle Purdy about this the other day. Um, the antis really don't have to show up and do much.
Mm-mm.
We've done it to
Or
ourselves. Yes, we are our worst enemy, 100%.
I'll tell you,
Go ahead.
just talking about being our enemies. I went to a bow hunting convention locally, and the biggest topic in debate was crossbow use.
Right.
And it was just a 40, 50 hunters in this convention hall, just butting heads. I mean, you would have thought like one side was PETA and one side was hunters. I mean, it was ridiculous how they were just butting heads over the concept of crossbow use and saying, oh, they're wounding more deer, or they're killing big bucks, or this or that. And it just broke down to somebody had a big buck killed on their neighbor's place by a crossbow, and it just chapped them too much about it. I'm like,
Right.
it really doesn't matter. I mean, if you want to go this route, whatever, but both of you are probably out in gun season, so you kind of lose your right to argue about
Credibility.
it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
So
I don't necessarily have a stance on the crossbow. Um, I think it's definitely got its use. There are people that may not be able to bow hunt with
mhm.
normal means of archery equipment, and therefore crossbow falls in line with that. Do I agree necessarily that crossbow should be used during rifle season? No, but at the same time, if it's legal in your state, hunt.
Yeah. I I really don't have any worries about it. I mean,
Mm.
not everybody has the time to get out like I do, and if they got that one day they can go out, I'd rather them go out with a crossbow and kill a big buck in my area than I would them shoot it with a compound at 40 yards and wound it and it runs over and rots somewhere. I mean,
Right.
it's all based around what people got time to do. Some people just don't have time to shoot 80 arrows a day and be proficient past 15 yards, 20 yards, and be able to shoot through little timber pockets and this and that. I'd rather have an ethical deer kill versus just finding stuff wounded around, or, vice versa. Some people think crossbows are guns and they take unreasonable shots too. But I mean, anything that gets them out of there, I'm not going to get aggravated with a guy using one or the other based on what they're comfortable with. I mean, we want to make ethical kills. Whatever gives you an ethical kill, whether it's shooting at 20 yards with a compound, or ethical to you is 45 yards on a stable rest with a crossbow. I mean, if you're doing your due diligence to not make an animal suffer, hey, kudos to you.
Yep. It's all got my vote. What's one of the biggest challenges you face year to year hunting, either
Um,
mentally or physically? I mean, both of us are in our mid 30s. We're not getting younger,
yeah,
but we are also, in my opinion, in pretty good shape. And I can say that with you because we've hunted side by side together for what, 4 or 5 days.
yeah, we put in some miles. Um, for me with my whitetail, it's a game of patience. I mean, it's a mental game to, like, my place I typically hunt is 26 miles from my farm. I mean, I got to get up at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, drive that distance, hike however far back, set all my stuff up. And then you sit for these long hours because I'm a big, hopefully get lucky in the rut kind of guy, just because I don't have that early season pattern because I talked to you about it because I don't have the acorns.
Mhm.
Me patterning something in October really doesn't happen just because of limitations, my food sources. So I wait and I get in cruising areas. And when I get in a cruising area, I'm in the long haul. There's not taking naps. I mean, you got one couple second chance. I mean, I might see one of my target age range bucks twice in a year. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you got to think if I'm out there 150, 200 hours of just getting up every morning, going out there, coming home late, sitting in a stand 6 hours. I mean, it wears on you, and it's mentally tough. And just going in, just having the mindset to get up, get after it. This could be it. You don't need doesn't take many seconds to make a shot. And you say, there it is, here's my shot. You gotta go. And just gut it out until it happens. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. Um, I I really got to I really got to experience that with you on your sheep hunt because we went over to the other side after we got on that group of 200 and we went over there and it was like a split second. Hey, there's your shot, take it.
Yeah. I mean,
And it
it
was
happened quick.
we were both worn out because you had to be on a plane what that day or the next morning.
So we killed on a Friday and I had to fly out on a Saturday at like when I needed to be at the airport at noon.
Mhm.
And we were 6, 8 hours from the airport. I mean, we were up all day and all night getting back in time.
Yeah. And it literally came down to just that moment of fourth quarter, last minute. We were really pushing time.
Yeah,
If we
yeah,
would
we
have hit,
were.
I think if we would have hit any kind of traffic or had any hiccups on that travel, you very well could have missed your flight.
Yeah, it was definitely pushing it for us. I mean, you were a champ. You drove all freaking night, and I know you were just as tired as I were. I mean, as I was, but I mean, we got back to camp and packed up at 11:30, and you just cannonball runned it. I mean, you we stopped at a truck stop at 5:30 in the morning and took a little power nap and finished it out into San Antonio.
That I think your hunt out there with me was it ranks very high of, and I'm not just saying this because you're here. You can ask anybody I've talked to. Your photo is typically one of the very first ones I show people whenever I talk about hunting out there. Your hunt was just, it was a relief to have somebody like you out there grinding it out, and there was no quit to either one of us.
No,
And that's,
we were
you can
just
apply
we were
that
racing
to,
each other to the top.
oh yeah, it was like who can put eyes on the most sheep right now? Let's go.
Yeah, yeah,
And
and
it's a relief to have somebody that's back to putting in the grind, right? It's a relief to have somebody that is just as driven as the guide to go do
mhm,
that. And obviously, you have a whole lot more um, investment into that hunt than I do, right? That's something I do
yeah,
every year from September to March. You have a 3 or 4 day slot to get this hunt done.
yeah,
You have airfare, you have the cost of the hunt and all the
and
gear and everything just to make it to that hunt, and then yeah, it's a testament to having a client that works well with a guide.
yeah, and you can't go out there and just not put in the effort. I mean, just like you said, it's a big investment to go in these hunts, and if like you told me, and we talked several times before I got out there about what your expectations were for me physically. And I mean, I followed it to a T. Me and my wife every evening when I got off work, when it was still, daylight at 7:45 and got dark at 9, we do a 3 mile ruck down the road. I put 60 pounds in my pack and just started walking
Yeah,
and just got used to using walking sticks and carrying that weight. On my days off, I'd go out to the local park and do hill climbs with that weight. I mean, I would go up across the road from the house and just go vertical up the hillside, getting used to just slipping on the loose dirt in my boots, breaking my boots in right. It was a couple month grind. I mean, it wasn't like I was trying to be a triathlon, but runner or something, but I wanted to be able to climb the hills and carry the weight, because that weight just makes a difference. You can't just climb hills and run it. If you're not used to that weight being on your hips or your shoulders, I mean, it's going to catch up with you quick. And man, by the time I got out there, I was really getting up them hills when I was used to 60 pounds on my back, and I was cruising with 20, and we're going a straight 70-degree incline, it felt like.
Yeah.
And we grinded it out. I mean, we put 20 miles in 2 days. I mean,
Yeah.
We didn't stop till dark.
Each day.
Yeah. And
Well,
you got to be in that shape. If you're not booking it, you're not making it to the next area, because you go in 3 hours, you got to come out 3 hours.
yeah. And there's unfortunately no way around it. I don't have a helicopter on speed dial, which is a good thing. It,
Yeah.
At the end of it, it makes you feel that sense of accomplishment, like you've really earned your trophy.
And that is how I felt. I mean, it was truly a buzzer beater moment of just disbelief that it happened the way it did. That we stumbled on 2 sheep just peeking over the mesa. I'm just like, let's see what's going on over here. And you were looking right, and I was looking left, and I saw them just peek over the edge. I said, dude, there's some Aoudad. And we got back around to them. They were gone. I mean, just disappeared. Nowhere to be found. Couldn't hear rocks, nothing. We were just a couple minutes behind them. And then you were over on that edge glassing, and you were like, dude, get over here quick. A monster just stepped out, and it was just him and a ewe. No rhyme or reason for him being there. And I mean,
No.
everything I could have wanted. I mean, it was just everything we talked about with the picture perfect sheep just popped out like off the trailer or something,
Yeah.
Not that was the case by any means, but it was
Not
just
at all.
full disbelief. I mean,
Yeah.
what are the odds?
Yeah, and I mean, I think we had even contemplated, we had gotten to the point of contemplating of like, man, you may have to come back.
Yeah. Yeah, I was real worried about it. I mean, just like you said, it's a big investment to get out there, and nobody wants to go home empty-handed. But I gotta say though, if I would have, I mean, it wouldn't have felt like I gave up on the hunt. I mean, there was nothing else you or I could have done with that time frame that we covered so freaking much with the time we were allowed.
Yeah.
I mean, if it wasn't for that mountain ops and IV hydration, I mean,
that stuff comes in clutch.
yeah, that kept us going.
Yeah, I mean, like mountain ops, if there's any chance at all that they're listening to this, like hook a brother up. I'm spending $40 and $50 every few weeks on on your flavors, because it's about the only thing that keeps me going anymore.
Yeah, and this isn't like named mountain ops for just the going on the hog hunt in the back of the truck, stay awake. I mean, for the purpose of the product, you are definitely using it, because you lose you sweat it all out. I mean, you're just one bottle of water away from just tensing up, and you're done. I mean,
how big of a factor, so if somebody's listening to this and they're wanting to go on an out west style hunt, right, whether it's here in West Texas or if it's Colorado, Montana, Utah, Wyoming, pick a mountain state, right, pick any state that's got mountains that has outfitters and guides, how important is it to get in shape for your hunt?
if you're not going to do it and you're not from an area, well, let me rephrase this. If you're not active and you want to do this, and you don't foresee you needing to be physically in shape for this, just don't even bother wasting anybody's time, yours or your guides, because you are going to get destroyed. I mean, I come from the kind of the mountainous part of West Virginia, not absurd mountains, but I'm climbing some hills.
No.
Even me, if I wouldn't have prepped the way I did, I would have been toast. I mean, there was just no way you're going to do that volume of inclines if you're not doing them every day just by work or something else. I mean, I mean, if you're surveying national parks or something, you got to do 10 miles a day of vertical incline mapping points or something, then yeah, maybe you might be all right. But I mean, you're run the mill, dude. If you're gonna book a hunt like this, you better be 6 months out getting prepped for it. I mean, especially if you're a flatland guy, because you got to use muscles you don't know you have. And if you're not constantly on mountains, you're gonna learn about it really quick. Because I mean, when you get your heart rate up and you're not used to climbing that stuff, it's not just a couple minutes when you get winded to get back out on your feet. I mean, you can be down for 15, 20 minutes getting your breath and getting your heart rate down that you can make the climb again. I mean, when you push over that edge, it's hard to come back real quick, especially doing
Especially,
that.
yeah, especially when you're grabbing, and this, it might be an exaggeration, but I really don't feel it is. When you're grabbing between 50 and 100 feet of elevation gain every push, and these pushes might only be 50 to 100 yards,
Yeah.
you're getting gassed out just because,
Mhm.
and it's not an elevation deal, right? The places that I hunt, we're not up there where elevation sickness is even on the radar, but it's not a slow, gradual wheelchair ramp climb up to something. You're going and you're in the bottom and then it's just straight up. Like you were saying
Yeah.
earlier, it's dang near a 70-degree incline on some of it.
Hmm. And then you got to think, if you're on a 5 day hunt and you want to climb like the hill that, well, the mountain we climbed,
Mhm.
we did it in 45 minutes. And how much elevation gain was that in 45 minutes?
We dropped down probably 60 to 70 feet to the bottom of elevation, and then we went back up from 2,800 to 4,000.
Yeah. And we covered 1,200 feet of elevation in 45 minutes. I mean, we gunned it up there. If that takes you 3, 4 hours, you only have maybe 10 hours of daylight.
Mhm.
I mean, you got 2 hours of hunt time then before you got to start making your way back if you wanted to be out at dark. I mean, if you want to hunt till dark and then you're out there till midnight making your way back, I mean, you got to think about that. I mean, and that was just 1,200 feet. What if you're out west and you say, all right, I got to make 5,000 feet elevation gain to get to the next spot to start cruising out the ridge or something absurd like that? I mean, you've got to be able to maximize your time for while you're out there. I mean, if you're slacking on that, you're going to be slacking on game.
And if you show up behind the curve or behind the cue ball or off the cue ball out there, you are constantly playing catch up because every minute, and I know like we took a couple breaks going up that 1,200-foot climb, right? But we
Mm-hmm.
were we were cruising in a manner where it could have taken us an hour and a half to get up there and we still had plenty of time. That's not
Oh,
always the case. But if it would have taken us an hour and a half, the rest of the day would have been spent like, okay, we've got to get here. We've got to get there. We've got to get there. We've got to get there. You and I, we made that ascent and we got to that top. And I was like, dude, I cannot believe, you know, I don't remember the exact times, but it was like we left point A at 11:30 and we were on top of point B by 12:15.
yeah.
And it was just like, holy smokes, dude, I cannot believe we just made that climb. Like I've never had a client that was that good of shape.
Yeah.
And it showed me like even I was struggling, but it was like, all right, 5 minute hydration break, let's roll. And
Mm-hmm.
just kept plugging at it. And I tell a lot of people, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. That's the same way you climb a mountain. You
Yeah.
go 15, 20, 30 yards, you stop, you catch your breath, you go 15, 20, 30 yards, you stop, you catch your breath, and you just keep going until you hit that top. And once you're on the top, it's smooth sailing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And I feel like, just from a client perspective, if you're out here, you're doing this, and you worked all the hours to be able to do a trip like this. You looked through all these outfits, finally picked the one you want to do. This is your time to shine. You ought to be out there with your guide and hopefully just maybe one step ahead, because he's done this every week for weeks on end. You you're in great shape, but you know, you don't have the motivation the guy that's going out on his dream hunt. And,
Right.
and that's how it ought to be. I mean, you ought to be out there. Just you got that grit just because you hadn't been beat down from doing it week after week. I mean,
Right.
to come out there and just half it, you know, you're just not keeping the pace. I mean, that's I don't know, it's just kind of insulting to me.
Mm-hmm. Kind of a lighter hearted question. Out of the places that you've hunted, or maybe trips that you have planned in the future, or places that you're going to go in the future to go hunt, what is like that bucket list place to hunt, and what would that animal look like?
Ooh. Um, I'm really big on a mountain goat right now.
Yeah.
Right. That has been my thing. I think they are just such cool animals. Just as the long hair on them, the terrain they live in. I mean, some people are big sheep guys, but man, I would love to just draw a mountain goat tag and get up on them snow peaks and see just that pure white fur on a rock face and just having one of those just absurd scenery pictures, just holding a big mountain goat with the mountain range behind you. I mean, I just think that would be so surreal being out there because those are the photos you look at and you can't really comprehend everything behind it. You know,
Yeah. You
there's
look at those
just
you look at those
terrain.
pictures. You look at those pictures and you're like, oh sweet, they got a mountain goat. But then you start, like, the way I look at it is like, you start thinking about, like, how many miles from camp were they? Were they
Mhm.
5? Were they 10? Were they 50 miles from camp? You know, and they're just taking spike camp with them every night.
Yep.
And it's like, what would that adventure look like? That's sorry. That is one of those hunts for me. The mountain goat, the bighorn, the stone, and the Alaskan doll.
Mhm.
All of those hunts, it's every picture you see, it's just like, one of these days I'm gonna make that happen. And
Yeah.
you're just trying to start, build the blocks, build the foundation for getting there. By no stretch of the imagination are those hunts cheap, but the reward at the end of that hunt, harvest or not, to go out there and accomplish that goal is, it far surpasses just about anything on this planet that I could think of.
Hmm. Yeah. I really didn't have an appreciation for those hunts until after I did my Aoudad hunt, if I'm going to be honest with you, because
Really?
when we got out there and we gutted it out like that and those mesas and just covering that terrain and just really putting in the work and that just unforgiving terrain, I started looking at those pictures and kind of was able to emphasize with them a little bit better to just think of what they went through to get to that point because it kind of got to walk a mile in a guy's shoes kind of deal to
Oh,
really
for sure.
understand some of those photos. Because when I look at, you know, a deer in the timber, and I don't want to say anything on the elk hunters because that's completely different. But you know, if you see a elk in the prairie or something, you're like, probably not that extensive as, you know, a big mountaintop. They're on a steep slope and they're taking a picture on, you know, a straight, not 70-degree slope trying to hold one up. That's different. But, you know,
Yeah.
you see that just the grit in the pictures. You're like, man, I bet that was fun and rewarding, really getting up there and gutting it out in some of those terrains.
Yep. Well, Alex, we're coming up. I think we're just over an hour, maybe even an hour and 30 minutes. I kind of lost track of time. Um,
Uh,
what's what's one more key piece of advice, or something that you once heard from one of the old timers, or something like that, that you can pass on to the hunters to really kind of get them thinking about going out and doing something that may be a little bit out of their comfort zone, but also they're going to enjoy and find success in a different manner?
Um, don't be afraid to do it. You can make money every day. And, you know, I'm a healthcare worker. I'm working with people of all ages, and nothing makes me happier when I talk to the older generation, you know, just these old guys that have been out west, done these hunts, you know, they're looking back at it in hindsight. And I've never met a guy that said, I wish I didn't hunt that much or I didn't do that trip. I mean, when you get bit by the outdoor bug, you need to go out and do it because you never know when your health's going to take a toll on you or something will happen. You'll never get to do that trip. Or you say, I'm going to put it off till I can make more money. Well, you might not have the health to do it. I mean, you got to do it when you can, make it work, and you're going to always have those memories. And every opportunity as an outdoorsman is getting harder to get, and then it's going to be more difficult in the future. Tags are getting harder to get, the prices are going up, land's getting more limited. I mean, there's so many factors, and every second you waste is an opportunity you might not get in the future. So just bite the bullet, make it work, get out there. You're going to hate it up until the point that you get back, but there's not been a single hunt that I've went on or done so far that I've been like, man, that was a waste of money or something. Like, I'm always thinking like, what's the next one? I got to do this while it's going to go up 10% next year. I better do it now or something like that. Like, get out, get it if you want to do it.
Yeah. And kind of my closing thought on this, we did talk a lot about guide client relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before your hunt with me, we didn't know each other. We had never interacted together. Your
Nope.
hunt has now been, what was that, the first part of November?
Yeah, November 1st to the 4th.
And this will air in May. So by the point that this airs, even after the hunt, we have maintained a friendship. We stay in
Yeah.
contact. I mean, we touch base almost every week or every other week. And I hope we get to go hunt again together, whether it's me guiding you or, if I come to West Virginia, we go turkey hunt or whitetail hunt, or, our friendship is more than just a client guide relationship. And I think a lot of people should be seeking that when they go to book a guide or an outfitter.
Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, it's a blessing that we really clicked the way we did. I mean, it's just one of them things. You meet somebody and you click, and I can't wait to hopefully book another hunt with you. I mean, or just have you come out and do turkeys with me just because you wanted to get a mountain turkey. I mean, it's cool, and I hope other people can kind of find that with their guides. And I mean, and like everybody wants to have a safe person that they feel like they can book another hunt with. I mean, you're dabbling in all kinds of stuff, and you're my guy for it now. If I'm looking for something Texas exotic or wanting to find another guide for something you might not specialize in, I mean, I can reach out to you. I trust you. And I mean, that's such a cool thing that we got that we're able to work with.
Absolutely. And that's, I kind of reiterate this a lot in a lot of episodes so far. That's kind of the whole purpose for this podcast, is for a prospective client to find an outfitter through this media that they can build that relationship with, that they can kind of hear and see how they do things from the outside, and then they can contact them. And you can tell, like, with a conversation, a couple phone conversations, of whether or not you're going to get along with your guide.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why this is called the Outfitter Connection Podcast, is because it's a connection source for clients to outfitters, clients to brands, taxidermists, which is something that you dabble into as well. And it's just, I don't know, it's just a nice little place to build a community, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think there should be more transparency and more discussion regarding that, because I think people just overlook that factor, and it's like 50% of it.
Right.
I mean, realistically,
Yeah.
I mean,
Because if you don't get along with your guide during your hunt, you're not going to, you may have a successful hunt, but you're not going to enjoy it. It's not,
yeah,
your guide has to be your guide first and foremost, your friend, at times a counselor, in certain scenarios a bartender. um,
mm-hmm.
they're just kind of this one all encompassing person that hopefully fits the client's personality.
Yeah, very
Awesome,
much
brother.
so.
I appreciate you coming on, Alex. I know
No,
it's 9 o'clock your time now.
man, I'm happy to be here. And if you ever want me back on the podcast, just holler at me. We'll talk about whatever, man. You take the lead and we'll back and forth with it a little bit. And I hope you have as many other thankful clients as I am that can get to come on here and discuss some stuff and talk about their experiences with you and
Yeah,
just kind of further enlighten into the guiding outfit a little bit and just friendships that you build with it.
absolutely, man. One thing before I let you go, if people wanted to follow along with your hunting journeys, or if they have questions about maybe habitat management, what practices that you use to implement with their deer herds or their habitat, how can they get a hold? How can they find you, and how can they get a hold of you?
They can find me on Facebook. It's Alexander James Kane. It's me and my beautiful wife with a black wildebeest as a profile picture. Just feel free to message me. I'm easy to get along with. I'll help you with whatever I can. Takes me a second to message back. Don't take it personal. I'll get to you. If you want to friend me on Instagram, look at some of my photos from my hunts and whatnot. It's Kane243, I believe. Follow me on that. You'll know it's me. You'll see that big massive Aoudad in one of the first pictures. But yeah, anybody that wants a reference for any kind of hunts I've done or just wanting to compare and contrast some ideas and stuff I've done or experiences, feel free to message me. I'll take the time to answer any questions.
Awesome, brother. Well, I appreciate you so much for coming on, and look forward to having you again.
No problem, buddy. You take care. I'm sure I'll
Ab-
talk to you soon.
Absolutely.